the universe, vast and filled with countless stars, had long been ruled by the alien alliance known as the Tyrak Collective. A conglomerate of species spanning dozens of galaxies, the Tyrak Collective's power was unparalleled. Their conquest of weaker civilizations had been relentless, and soon, the once thriving planets of the galaxy bowed to their superior technology and might. Earth, a small, overlooked planet in the farthest corner of the galaxy, had never been considered a threat. Humanity, in its infancy, had long been disregarded by the galactic powers. However, the collective's ambitions shifted when they learned of Earth's untapped potential. A new resource had been discovered, a powerful, ancient element buried deep beneath the surface of the planet. To the Tyrak, it was the final piece needed to cement their dominance. They set their sights on Earth, prepared to take what was theirs. But Earth's leaders were not as blind as the aliens thought. Unknown to the collective, humans had been silently preparing for this day for decades. The governments of Earth, in secret collaboration, had spent years analyzing alien technology, reverse engineering it, and developing their own weapons. They knew that Earth's resistance, while initially weak, would need to be ready for the coming storm. At the heart of this secret project was a team of brilliant scientists and military strategists led by Dr. Evelyn Carter. Dr. Carter, a former astrophysicist turned military advisor, had been tasked with overseeing the development of Earth's secret weapon. She had witnessed firsthand the devastation caused by the Tyrak Collective in their conquest of neighboring planets. But what the Tyrak had underestimated was the indomitable human spirit, the drive to survive, adapt, and, above all, fight back. The project, codenamed Eclipse, was a daring plan to create a weapon capable of turning the tide of the inevitable war. The weapon was not one of destructive power, like the devastating energy beams that the Tyrak wielded, but something far more dangerous, a force that could exploit the weaknesses of the alien species' very biology. The key to this weapon was the human genome itself, specifically, the untapped potential lying dormant in the human brain. The first step had been to recruit the best minds on Earth, people whose intelligence could match that of the Tyrak scientists. Dr. Carter's team consisted of geneticists, neurologists, and computer engineers, all working together to unlock the hidden potential of humanity. What they discovered was nothing short of extraordinary. Human DNA contained latent sequences, dormant strands that, if properly stimulated, could activate powers far beyond human understanding. The Tyrak, with all their advanced technology, had failed to comprehend this secret within the human genome. They believed themselves the apex of evolution, incapable of imagining that a species on a backwater planet could hold the key to a new kind of warfare. Meanwhile, the Tyrak fleet, led by Commander Ziller, was assembling at the outskirts of Earth's solar system, preparing for the final strike. Their ships, sleek and menacing, blotted out the stars as they moved toward the blue planet below. Ziller's orders were clear. Earth was to be harvested for its resources, and its population wiped out if necessary. He had no doubts that the invasion would be swift and total. After all, the Tyrak had faced countless lesser species and emerged victorious every time. However, Ziller's overconfidence would prove to be his downfall. While the Tyrak prepared for an easy conquest, Dr. Carter and her team had their own plans. The Eclipse project was nearing completion, and its test trials had yielded promising results. Humanity's hidden potential, once unlocked, was something no alien force could anticipate. The final step remained, a method to awaken this power across the entire human population. As Earth's defenders waited, they knew the time for subtlety was over. Dr. Carter's weapon was ready to be unleashed, but the question remained, would it be enough to overcome the alien might of the Tyrak Collective? In the shadows of Earth's underground labs, the first of the activation sequences was initiated. A series of pulses, designed to unlock the dormant potential in every human mind, began to spread across the globe. But the weapon was untested, and no one knew how far-reaching its effects would be. As the Tyrak fleet closed in, the first signs of change began to appear among Earth's population. People, ordinary citizens going about their daily lives, began to experience strange sensations, visions, heightened senses, and bursts of inexplicable strength. It was only the beginning, but it was clear that humanity's secret weapon had been activated. Now, they would have to see if it would be enough to defend their planet, or if their last hope would crumble before the might of the alien invaders. The battle for Earth had begun, but no one expected what was coming next. Humanity, the underdog, was about to show the universe that it was not as weak as the Tyrak had believed. The stakes were higher than ever, and the outcome would be nothing short of a revolution. The activation of humanity's secret weapon began to unfold in a way that even Dr. Evelyn Carter had not anticipated. The pulses of energy sent through the global network were not simply unlocking dormant potential in the human brain, they were transforming it. The neural pathways of every individual on Earth, regardless of age or location, were being reprogrammed. The latent strands of DNA that had remained dormant for millennia were now active, and humanity was awakening to a power they had never known. At first, the changes were subtle. People began to experience heightened senses, faster reflexes, and a strange sense of heightened awareness. In major cities, ordinary individuals, office workers, teachers, and even children could suddenly perceive the world in ways they never thought possible. A person could hear a whisper across a crowded room, feel the heat of a distant flame, or see the smallest movement from the corner of their eye. It was as though they were becoming something more than human, something new and powerful. The first major breakthrough came when a man in New York City, a construction worker named Ben Calder, discovered that he could lift an object far heavier than he ever should have been able to. He had been working on the framework of a high-rise when an accident occurred. A steel beam began to fall toward a group of workers below. Without thinking, Ben extended his arms, and to his amazement, he caught the beam effortlessly, his muscles bulging and veins throbbing as though his body had been augmented by some unseen force. He tossed the beam aside with little effort, his heart racing as he realized what had just occurred. It was as though his strength had been multiplied tenfold, and it wasn't just him. Around the city, others were experiencing similar moments of power. These changes were not isolated incidents. As the pulses continued to sweep across the globe, the effects became more pronounced. People began to exhibit extraordinary abilities, faster reflexes, sharper minds, and even telepathic connections between individuals. There were rumors of people who could manipulate objects with their thoughts or tap into the thoughts of others. The weapon that had been designed to awaken latent genetic power was pushing humanity to new heights, and the world was beginning to feel the tremors of its transformation. While the people of Earth marveled at their newfound abilities, the Tyrak Collective remained unaware of the changes unfolding before them. Commander Ziller's fleet moved forward relentlessly, their weapons primed for an easy victory. Earth's military, while still technologically inferior, had already begun to mobilize, but the Tyrak underestimated the true nature of the threat that now faced them. They thought their invincible fleets would crush the planet's defenses, but they had failed to account for one simple truth. They had never encountered a species like humanity. Dr. Carter, working alongside her team, was beginning to understand the extent of what they had unleashed. The weapon, which was originally conceived as a way to defend Earth against the Tyrak invasion, had turned into something far more than they had planned. It was not just a weapon, it was an evolution, a revolution of the human race. At a secure military base in Nevada, Dr. Carter convened a meeting with high-ranking officials from Earth's Global Defense Council. The pulses have changed the very fabric of human nature, she explained, pacing in front of a holographic display. We've unlocked dormant abilities in our DNA that could give us the edge we need to face the Tyrak, but we still don't understand the full extent of what's happening. We need to learn how to harness this power quickly, before the invasion begins. General Marcus Volker, one of the leading military strategists, nodded gravely. What are you suggesting, Doctor? That we put our faith in civilians with no formal training? That we arm the masses with powers they can't control? Dr. Carter paused, her eyes narrowing in thought. I'm not suggesting we arm them, but these abilities are already spreading. We need to train the people who are showing signs of enhanced potential, the ones who are most capable of handling their new powers. If we can harness this transformation, we might be able to turn the tide. As she spoke, her mind raced with possibilities. The technology of the Tyrak Collective was impressive, but it had one flaw. It was bound by the biological limits of the alien species. The Tyrak's advancements were rooted in mechanical and technological evolution. They had no understanding of the organic power now coursing through humanity's veins. But what Dr. Carter didn't know was that the Tyrak had already begun to detect anomalies in Earth's energy signatures. The collective, advanced though they were, had never seen anything like this before. The pulse signals sent by Earth's activation had been intercepted, and Commander Ziller had ordered an immediate investigation. Back on Earth, the first organized resistance groups began to form, made up of civilians who had already experienced their newfound powers. People who had previously been powerless and helpless now found themselves capable of defending their families, their communities, and their planet. It was the beginning of a revolution that would change the course of history. The Tyrak may have underestimated humanity's resilience, but they were about to find out that Earth was not so easy to conquer. The question was no longer whether Earth could survive. It was whether the Tyrak would even stand a chance against the new force that had risen from the ashes of their overconfidence. And in the shadows, humanity's true secret weapon was still waiting to be fully unleashed. The Tyrak fleet was now only a few days away from Earth. Commander Ziller, aboard the massive warship Nyrex, watched the planet through his observation window with a sense of cold, detached confidence. His invasion was all but assured, and he felt no fear as he prepared to lead the final assault. He had witnessed the fall of countless worlds, and Earth's fate would be no different. They were weak, primitive, and utterly unprepared for the might of the collective. However, something was beginning to trouble him. The anomaly, those strange energy signals detected in the far reaches of the solar system, had only grown stronger. Ziller had dismissed it at first as a fluke or interference, but it had persisted, and now it seemed to be spreading across the planet itself. It was unlike anything the Tyrak had ever encountered. Still, he maintained his arrogance. It would not stop the invasion. Down on Earth, the situation was rapidly evolving. Dr. Evelyn Carter and her team had worked tirelessly to prepare for the coming conflict, but they had no illusions about the scale of the challenge. Earth's military had begun to form specialized units, comprised of civilians who had displayed the greatest signs of enhanced abilities. These individuals were trained quickly, using whatever resources they had to harness their newfound powers. Some could move objects with their minds, others exhibited superhuman speed, and a few had begun to manipulate energy itself, creating blasts of raw force with a mere thought. The world was in chaos. Governments were preparing for war, civilians were arming themselves, and entire cities were on high alert. But despite the initial signs of hope, the truth was clear. Earth's power had only just begun to awaken. They were not yet ready for the onslaught of the Tyrak fleet. It was during one of these chaotic moments that humanity's first true victory took place. In the middle of a barren desert, a group of soldiers and civilians, part of the newly formed Earth Defense Corps, had been working to build a base of operations. The team was led by Lieutenant Jessica Holt, a former Army officer who had recently discovered she could move at speeds that far surpassed those of any human being. She and her team had been working on the outskirts of the Nevada desert when they first detected the Tyrak's approach. A fleet of warships had entered Earth's orbit, and the enemy was preparing to strike. But what the Tyrak didn't know was that Earth's forces had already made the first strike. Lieutenant Holt and her team, along with a group of civilians who had tapped into their latent abilities, were ready. They were the first human force to take the fight to the Tyrak, launching a daring assault on one of the alien ships that had descended into Earth's atmosphere. Using their newfound powers, they managed to infiltrate the warship's defenses, taking the aliens by surprise. Holt, faster than the eye could track, moved with inhuman speed, cutting through the Tyrak's advanced weaponry with a precision that left the invaders stunned. A soldier with telekinetic abilities lifted debris and turned it into projectiles, hurling them at the enemy ships with devastating accuracy. Another soldier, able to manipulate energy, unleashed a concentrated blast of force, tearing through the ship's outer hull and creating a breach. The Tyrak soldiers, advanced though they were were not prepared for the sheer unpredictability of the human attacks. They had assumed that Earth's military would be easily overwhelmed, but what they didn't understand was that humanity had adapted far more quickly than anyone could have predicted. The battle was brief, but intense. The Tyrak warship, which had been set to launch an orbital strike on the planet's major cities, was destroyed in a series of explosive bursts. The Earth Defense Corps, with their new powers and guerrilla tactics, had won their first victory. It was a significant blow to the Tyrak Collective, and though Earth had only a fraction of the weaponry the aliens possessed, the victory was symbolic, proof that the tide of war could be turned. As the warship crashed to the ground, Lieutenant Holt stood victorious, her heart pounding in her chest as she watched the wreckage. She had no idea how many more Tyrak ships were out there, or if humanity was truly ready for what was to come, but one thing was clear: Earth was no longer a defenseless world. The secret weapon was not just an idea, it was a reality. Dr. Carter, upon hearing the news of the victory, couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. The Tyrak had not only underestimated the power of humanity, but had failed to recognize the strength that lay in the unity of a species fighting for its survival. However, the Tyrak were not ones to let a loss go unpunished. Commander Ziller, infuriated by the destruction of his warship, vowed to wipe out the human resistance with all the might his fleet could muster. He sent orders for a full-scale bombardment of Earth, intending to obliterate the planet's defenses before the rebellion could spread any further. As the Tyrak fleet regrouped, Ziller focused his attention on Earth's defenses. This small victory by humanity would not go unanswered. Meanwhile, on Earth, humanity's newfound powers were growing. The secret weapon that had been designed to defend the planet had now become something far greater, a force that could change the course of history. Humanity was no longer just fighting for survival, they were fighting for their very existence. And this time, the Tyrak would not find victory so easily. The first strike had been a success, but the war was only beginning. With each passing moment, Earth's hidden potential was unfolding, and the stakes had never been higher. The aliens were coming, but now, humanity had a chance to show them just how dangerous they truly were. The destruction of the Tyrak warship was just the beginning. The victory, though significant, was not without consequences. Commander Ziller, now driven by a mix of rage and disbelief, had mobilized the full force of the Tyrak Collective to eliminate the human threat once and for all. Their advanced weapons, their fleets, their superior technology, all of it was about to be brought to bear on Earth in an effort to stamp out the spark of rebellion before it could spread further. But what the Tyrak Collective didn't realize was that the destruction of their warship had triggered something even more profound in humanity. The first wave of resistance fighters had proved that Earth's newfound powers were not just the result of a temporary surge. They were an evolution, one that was growing stronger every day. Across the globe, the awakened humans, those with the greatest control over their abilities, began to organize into small resistance cells. These groups were diverse, made up of civilians, soldiers, scientists, and even children, all united by a common cause: to protect their home and to fight back against the alien invaders. One of the most prominent of these resistance leaders was Marcus Volker, a former military general who had once been skeptical of the Eclipse project. He had seen the human race struggle through countless wars, always outmatched, always behind. But now, as he stood at the helm of one of Earth's newly established military outposts, he understood the full scope of what they had unleashed. His powers, too, had grown. He could now perceive the slightest movements in his environment, reacting to threats with reflexes that far surpassed those of any human. And it wasn't just him. The new generation of soldiers, trained and enhanced by the pulse, were ready for what was coming. As the resistance began to grow, so too did the Tyrak's response. The collective launched a series of devastating orbital bombardments, targeting key cities and infrastructure around the world. The destruction was massive. Cities were reduced to rubble, millions of lives were lost. But the Tyrak had underestimated one thing: the resilience of the human spirit. Humanity had never faced an enemy quite like the Tyrak, but they had faced their own history of oppression, war, and conquest. They had learned to adapt, to endure, and to rise again. This time, it was no different. In the ashes of the Tyrak bombardments, small pockets of humanity began to fight back in earnest. Teams of resistance fighters, led by people like Lieutenant Jessica Holt, whose speed and agility had made her a force to be reckoned with, began to take the fight to the aliens. They raided Tyrak supply depots, sabotaged communication networks, and struck fear into the hearts of the invaders. One of the most daring operations was led by a civilian scientist named Dr. Harrison Shaw, a geneticist who had been part of the original Eclipse project. Dr. Shaw had been working on a way to harness the newly unlocked human abilities and amplify them even further. He had discovered a method to stabilize the powers that were growing unstable in many people, enhancing them without the risk of burnout or mutation. He believed that by creating a serum, he could give ordinary humans the power to fight back against the Tyrak forces in a more controlled, sustainable way. The first test of Shaw's serum was conducted on a small team of volunteers, many of whom had already displayed advanced abilities. The results were staggering. Those who had been enhanced by the pulses found that their powers were now more controlled, more reliable. They could move faster, think clearer, and their abilities had become even more potent. This serum was humanity's next big step toward truly leveling the playing field with the Tyrak. As the resistance continued to grow in numbers and strength, the Tyrak responded with brutal force. Ziller, now personally leading the assault on Earth, ordered his fleet to launch wave after wave of attacks. His ships were larger, faster, and more heavily armed than any Earth technology, and yet they were being met with more and more resistance. Every attack was met with counterattacks from guerrilla forces who were learning how to wield their new powers with deadly efficiency. Earth's new weapon was not only its human-enhanced soldiers, but the ingenuity of its people. They had begun to adapt Tyrak technology and turn it against them. The first of Earth's new anti-Tyrak weapons came in the form of a specialized EMP device built by a group of engineers in Asia. This device was capable of disabling the electronic systems of Tyrak ships, temporarily rendering their weapons useless. The Resistance quickly discovered that they could exploit the Tyrak's dependence on their advanced technology, striking at their weaknesses. But as humanity's power grew, so did the Tyrak's desire for retribution. Ziller's forces began to develop new tactics specifically designed to counter the growing human resistance. The Tyrak began to send in specialized shock troops, elite soldiers equipped with advanced exoskeletons and weapons designed to neutralize Earth's enhanced individuals. These warriors, capable of matching the strength and speed of the humans, were a new threat that Earth's forces had to adapt to quickly. As humanity's resistance gained momentum, an unexpected ally arrived. Deep within the depths of Earth's underground bunkers, Dr. Carter and her team had been working on a final, decisive weapon, the ability to transmit a powerful signal that could amplify the mental abilities of every human on Earth, uniting their thoughts in a single, focused push. The effects of this weapon, if successful, could turn the tide of the war in one decisive move. The resistance forces were ready, but time was running out. The Tyrak were closing in on Earth's capital cities, and it was only a matter of time before they launched their final assault. Humanity's secret weapon was ready to be deployed, but the question remained, would it be enough to stop the Tyrak from annihilating everything humanity had fought for? In the heart of Earth's final defense, General Volker stood alongside Dr. Carter, his gaze fixed on the Tyrak fleet hovering overhead. The future of the planet rested on the next few moments. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about sending a message to the Tyrak collective. Earth was no longer a planet to be ignored. Earth was a force to be reckoned with. And humanity would fight until their last breath to prove it. The war had reached its breaking point. The Tyrak fleet, led by Commander Ziller, loomed overhead, casting shadows over Earth's cities as they prepared to launch their final assault. Earth's resistance, now a unified and well-coordinated force, had made incredible strides, but they knew the Tyrak's retaliation would be brutal. Every victory, every strike against the invaders, had only fueled their desire for vengeance. And now, with Earth's most powerful weapon on the horizon, the two sides were on the cusp of a final, cataclysmic showdown. At the heart of Earth's last line of defense stood the massive facility known as the Nexus, an underground complex built in secrecy over the last few years. It was here that Dr. Evelyn Carter and her team had completed the development of their final weapon, the amplification signal. This device, when activated, would send out a wave of psychic energy that could amplify the abilities of every enhanced human across the globe. If successful, it would unite their collective strength into a focused, unstoppable force, one that could finally stand against the overwhelming might of the Tyrak. But the device had not been tested. There was no certainty it would work as intended. Dr. Carter had her doubts, but it was humanity's last hope. Standing next to her, General Marcus Volker looked at the display, showing the massive Tyrak fleet now descending toward Earth's atmosphere. The fleet was immense, hundreds of warships, each one more powerful than anything Earth had ever known. They had already obliterated key cities and military bases, and now the final strike was imminent. If they failed to stop the invasion now, Earth would fall, and humanity's rebellion would be crushed. "We can't afford to fail," Volker said, his voice steady but tinged with an edge of urgency. "If this doesn't work, we lose everything." Dr. Carter nodded grimly. "The risks are high, but we don't have a choice. This is the only way to break through the Tyrak's defenses and give humanity a chance." Outside the Nexus, in the final resistance strongholds, Earth's enhanced soldiers were preparing for battle. Among them was Lieutenant Jessica Holt, who had become a symbol of hope for the human race. Her speed and strength had made her a leader in the field, but even she knew that their powers, while growing, were still not enough to match the full force of the Tyrak fleet. "This is it," Holt whispered to herself as she stood with her team, watching the skies darken with the shadow of the Tyrak ships. "We're fighting for everything now." The air buzzed with tension as resistance fighters, ordinary civilians, scientists, and soldiers alike, gathered in their last rallying points. Dr. Shaw's serum had stabilized the enhanced abilities of many, allowing them to form a cohesive force ready for action. But the key to humanity's survival would come from the amplification signal. If Dr. Carter and her team could activate it in time, Earth's fighters would gain a power unlike any they had ever dreamed. Meanwhile, aboard the Nyrex, Commander Ziller paced in his war room, staring at the live feeds of Earth's resistance. He had seen their actions, their growing strength, and he had come to one conclusion. The humans were no longer the weak, disorganized species he had once thought. Their newfound power, though primitive compared to Tyrak technology, was a real threat. It was time to end it all. "Prepare the bombardment," Ziller ordered coldly. "I want Earth's resistance wiped out before they can even think of activating whatever weapon they're planning." Ziller's plan was simple but devastating, an overwhelming, all-encompassing orbital strike. His fleet was equipped with powerful weapons that could obliterate entire cities in a single blast, and now he intended to use them to destroy the heart of humanity's last defense. The Nexus and its amplification signal would be the first targets. As the Tyrak began their descent, preparing to launch their final assault, Earth's forces moved into position. Resistance cells were positioned strategically across the globe, ready to strike at Tyrak ground forces and disrupt their operations. Holt's team, armed with the latest technology and their enhanced abilities, prepared to infiltrate and take down Tyrak commanders on the ground. Inside the Nexus, Dr. Carter and her team were making final preparations. The amplification signal was powered up, but the countdown was close. Volker's team had been tasked with holding off any Tyrak units that might attempt to breach the Nexus before the signal could be activated. Then, just as Dr. Carter began to initiate the final sequence, an alarm blared through the facility. "The Tyrak are deploying a full-scale bombardment," one of her assistants shouted. "They're targeting the Nexus and our defense points." Dr. Carter's heart sank. "We don't have much time." Outside, the Tyrak's first barrage of fire began to rain down, lighting up the sky with fiery streaks of energy. Earth's defenders, already spread thin, had no choice but to dig in and fight back with everything they had. Volker's forces engaged Tyrak ground units with all their might, but the aliens' exoskeleton-clad soldiers were formidable. The battle for survival had become a desperate one. Back inside the Nexus, Dr. Carter stood by the amplification signals control console, her fingers trembling as she initiated the sequence. The device began to hum with power, its energy building. A pulse rippled outward, sending a shockwave across the globe. All at once, every human who had been enhanced by the Eclipse Project felt the surge of energy. Their abilities flared, reaching new heights. Jessica Holt, caught in the midst of battle, felt the full brunt of the amplification. Her senses sharpened beyond anything she had ever experienced. Her speed reached levels where time seemed to slow down around her, and she moved with fluid, effortless grace. She could hear the thoughts of her comrades as they fought, their collective will focused on one goal: victory. The Resistance fighters felt their powers surge, and they began to push back the Tyrak forces. As the amplified humans tore through the battlefield, they began to win ground, using their enhanced abilities to dismantle Tyrak squads, disable alien weaponry, and destroy critical systems. But in the sky, the Tyrak were not retreating. Ziller, watching from the Nyrex, saw the amplified human forces tearing through his soldiers with devastating efficiency. "Order the fleet to engage the signal's source," he growled. "We can't let them win." The final battle had begun, but the true question remained: would the power of humanity's newfound abilities be enough to break the will of the Tyrak, or would Earth's last hope be destroyed before it could see the light of victory? The war had reached its tipping point, and only one side would emerge victorious. The battle raged on across Earth's surface, an all-out war unlike anything humanity had ever witnessed. The Tyrak's orbital bombardment was relentless, but the amplification signal had done what it was designed to do. Humanity's enhanced soldiers were now more powerful than ever, moving faster, thinking clearer, and acting as one cohesive force. It was the tipping point they had needed. Jessica Holt, now a blur of motion on the battlefield, darted through the Tyrak forces with an intensity she had never felt before. Her mind, sharpened by the amplification signal, guided her actions with perfect precision. She could see the movements of every Tyrak soldier, every projectile, and she moved with an ease that made her seem almost supernatural. The battlefield was hers to command. "Keep pushing," Holt shouted to her team, her voice cutting through the chaos of the war. "We've got them on the ropes." Around her, Resistance fighters, powered by their newfound abilities, pushed back against the Tyrak forces. Earth soldiers, once weak and untrained, now fought with the confidence of warriors who knew they could win. The Tyrak's exoskeleton-clad shock troops, formidable as they were, could no longer keep up with the onslaught. The destruction was enormous. Tyrak war machines exploded in fiery bursts, torn apart by human telekinetic power, energy blasts, and sheer strength. Resistance units infiltrated enemy strongholds with brutal efficiency, sabotaging weapons and communication networks, disrupting the Tyrak's ability to coordinate their assault. The alien invaders, once so confident in their dominance, were beginning to falter. Inside the Nexus, Dr. Carter and her team monitored the chaos unfolding on the surface. Their plan was working, but they knew they couldn't afford to let up. The amplification signal had ignited a fire in humanity's heart, but it was not yet enough to ensure victory. They needed to strike at the Tyrak's leadership to cut off the head of the serpent. General Volker, standing beside Dr. Carter, studied the live feeds of the battlefield. His mind raced as he considered their next move. The Tyrak were beginning to regroup, reinforcing their forces, but the amplification signal had shifted the balance. The humans were now fighting on equal footing. "This is our chance," Volker said, his voice tight with determination. "We got to hit the Nyrex and take down Ziller. If we don't, this will drag on, and more of us will die. We have to end it now." Dr. Carter nodded. "I'll work with the team to ensure the signal stays active. You take your forces and go. You're our only shot." Volker didn't hesitate. He turned to his command staff. "Get me a team ready to go. We're making a final push to the Tyrak flagship. With the Resistance's newfound power and Ziller's leadership becoming increasingly vulnerable, Earth's forces were preparing to make a bold and decisive strike. Meanwhile, aboard the Nyrex, Commander Ziller seethed with fury. His forces were being torn apart, and his once imposing fleet was being systematically dismantled. The humans had proven to be far more resilient than he had anticipated, and the amplification signal had created an unpredictable force that was eating away at his command. His shock troops, which had been engineered to neutralize human abilities, were now ineffective against the sheer power of humanity's united front. "Activate the fleet's emergency defense protocols," Ziller barked. "We need to buy time for reinforcements." The Nyrex had become a symbol of Tyrak power, and Ziller was unwilling to let it fall. He ordered the ship's heavy weaponry to engage Earth's resistance with everything they had. The ship's massive plasma cannons fired into the heart of human resistance lines, creating massive craters in the Earth. But the humans, fueled by the power of the amplification signal, were not retreating. They advanced, and they were coming for him. Meanwhile, Volker's strike team, composed of Earth's best and brightest, was already en route to the Nyrex. They had a singular objective: get to Ziller and end the war. Volker, joined by Holt, Dr. Shaw, and other key resistance fighters, boarded a newly adapted Earth transport ship capable of bypassing some of the Tyrak's defenses. The ship moved at incredible speeds, cutting through the chaos of the ongoing battle as it made its way toward the flagship. On board the Nyrex, Ziller prepared for the worst. His fleet was crumbling, but he had one final ace up his sleeve: the planet-cracking weapon, a massive device built into the Nyrex's core. It could obliterate any large city with a single strike, and if activated, it would leave Earth in ruins. He wasn't about to let the humans win. If he couldn't conquer the planet, he would at least ensure that nothing remained of it. As the transport ship approached the Nyrex, Volker's heart pounded in his chest. They had no time to waste. They had to reach the core of the flagship and disable the planet cracker before Ziller could unleash it. "We're almost there," Holt said, her voice steady despite the intensity of the moment. "Prepare for insertion." The transport ship dropped out of the sky, its thrusters blazing as it came in fast, avoiding the last line of defense the Tyrak had set up. The moment the ship hit the Nyrex's hull, Volker and his team charged, their enhanced abilities propelling them forward at blinding speeds. They were met with heavy resistance as Tyrak soldiers tried to repel the human invaders, but they were no match for Earth's amplified warriors. Holt moved like a streak of lightning, cutting down the soldiers in her path. Dr. Shaw's telekinetic force sent enemies flying. Volker, with his heightened reflexes and strength, cleared a path to the ship's core, where Ziller awaited. As they neared the control room, the Tyrak's last line of defense arrived, Ziller himself, towering in his exosuit, wielding the power of the fleet. The final confrontation was imminent. "I will not let you destroy everything we've worked for," Ziller growled, his voice reverberating with fury. "You've already lost," Volker said, his voice calm, unwavering. "Your fleet is in shambles. Your plan is falling apart. And you've underestimated humanity for the last time." Ziller snarled and activated his exosuit's weapons, charging at Volker with a terrifying speed. The fight had begun. The fate of Earth and the galaxy would be decided in this final clash. The control room of the Nyrex was a stark, metallic chamber, bathed in the cold glow of alien technology. Commander Ziller stood at the center, his massive exosuit pulsating with energy, the power of the Tyrak fleet coursing through his systems. His eyes blazed with hatred as he watched the humans approach, their enhanced abilities a clear testament to their evolution. They were no longer the weak, fragile creatures he had once dismissed. They were now a force capable of toppling an empire. "You should have stayed in your primitive world," Ziller sneered, his voice a low growl. "But you insisted on challenging the might of the Tyrak. You will regret this." General Marcus Volker, flanked by Lieutenant Jessica Holt and Dr. Harrison Shaw, stepped into the room, his stance unwavering. His enhanced strength and reflexes made him a formidable opponent, but even he knew this battle would be different. Zilla was not just another alien soldier. He was the leader of the Tyrak Collective, a being whose power and intellect had shaped the galaxy for centuries. "We don't regret anything," Volker said, his voice steady, yet tinged with the weight of everything they had fought for. "We're here to end this." Without warning, Ziller lunged, his exosuit firing a barrage of energy blasts. Volker's instincts kicked in, and he dove to the side, narrowly avoiding the assault. Holt, with her enhanced speed, was already on the move, darting past the blasts and striking at Ziller's exposed flank. But his suit was reinforced, and her blows, though powerful, barely made a dent. "We have to disable his suit," Holt called out as she danced around him, looking for an opening. Dr. Shaw, his mind working at lightning speed, saw an opportunity. The power core, his exosuit, is channeling all its energy through it. If we can disrupt the flow, we might be able to take him down. The battle in the control room grew frantic. Ziller's movements were swift and deadly, his exosuit's weapons firing in every direction. Volker and his team were able to keep pace, their enhanced abilities allowing them to dodge, counter, and retaliate, but Ziller was relentless. "You think you can defeat me?" Ziller roared, his voice shaking the room. "I am the Tyrak. You are nothing." Volker's gaze never wavered. "The Tyrak are a dying empire. And you're just a leader who failed to see the strength of humanity." With a sudden surge of energy, Ziller launched a series of energy blasts at Dr. Shaw, forcing him to duck behind a console for cover. Holt, sensing the danger, closed the gap between them in the blink of an eye, slashing at the exosuit's armor with a high-powered energy blade. Sparks flew, but Ziller swatted her aside with a force that sent her crashing into the far wall. Volker acted quickly. With a focused thought, his enhanced strength propelled him forward, delivering a powerful strike to the back of Ziller's exosuit. The impact reverberated through the room, and for a brief moment, Ziller stumbled. "It was enough. We need to focus," Volker shouted. "Dr. Shaw now." Shaw's mind whirred, his telekinetic powers reaching out to the core of Ziller's exosuit. With a concentrated effort, he began to disrupt the energy flow, sending violent waves of psychic force into the suit's systems. Ziller's body trembled, his weaponry faltering. "No," Ziller howled, struggling to maintain control. His fists slammed into the walls of the control room, but the suit was no longer responding as it should. Shaw's psychic onslaught was breaking it down, piece by piece. In that moment, Volker seized the opportunity. With one final, devastating blow, he struck the exosuit's power core. The suit erupted in a violent explosion of sparks and light, and Ziller, thrown back by the blast, let out a guttural roar of defeat. The control room fell silent. Ziller lay on the ground, his suit shattered and smoking. Volker and his team stood over him, their breathing heavy, but their resolve unbroken. They had done it. They had defeated the Tyrak's mightiest warrior. But the battle wasn't over yet. Shaw stepped forward cautiously, his telekinetic powers still at the ready. Ziller's eyes burned with fury as he glared up at the humans. "This isn't over," Ziller spat. "You may have won this battle, but the Tyrak will never fall. You are nothing but insects to us." Volker knelt down, locking eyes with the alien commander. "You may have had your empire, but humanity is just getting started. We've fought for this moment, and we'll fight to protect our world. You and your empire are nothing now." As Ziller seethed, Volker made a decision. He turned to Dr. Carter, who had arrived in the control room just in time to see the confrontation. "Activate the planet cracker," Volker said, his voice resolute. "It's over. Let's end this." Dr. Carter nodded, her fingers moving swiftly over the console. The Nyrex's massive weapon began to power up. Ziller's eyes widened in horror as he realized what was happening. His fleet, his empire, was on the brink of collapse. "No. You can't," Ziller began, but his words were cut off as the weapon's energy surged to life. The hum of the massive cannon filled the room. With a flash of brilliant light, the Nyrex unleashed its devastating power. But instead of destroying Earth, it was turned against the Tyrak fleet. Earth's forces had already disabled much of the fleet's defenses, and now, with the planet cracker turned on its creators, the Tyrak flagship was engulfed in a destructive wave of energy. The remaining Tyrak ships, scattered and disorganized, were obliterated in a series of catastrophic explosions. Ziller's final words were lost in the roar of the energy blast. The battle was over. The Tyrak were defeated. Humanity had won. As the dust settled and the remnants of the Tyrak fleet drifted in space, General Volker, Lieutenant Holt, Dr. Shaw, and Dr. Carter stood at the control room window, looking out at the void. Earth had won its freedom, but the war had changed them all. Humanity had fought back not with superior technology or overwhelming numbers, but with something far greater: their will to survive, to fight, and to protect what was theirs. And as the stars beyond Earth's atmosphere twinkled silently, the survivors knew one thing for certain: humanity was no longer just a small, insignificant species. They had become a force to be reckoned with, a force that would rise again if ever needed, and one that would never be conquered. The future was now theirs to shape.